I'd like to ask you a question that may disturb you. It's a simple question, one you've probably never been asked directly, and yet your entire life has been shaped by how you've answered it, whether you knew it or not. Here's the question. What stands between you and success? Take a moment. What comes to mind? If you're like most people, and I've asked this question of thousands, you'll point to something outside yourself. Money, perhaps? If I just had more capital to work with, things would be different. Or connections. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Education comes up frequently. So does timing, location, the economy, family obligations, health problems, or simply bad luck. Here's what's remarkable. Virtually none of these answers are correct. Not one. And the correct answer, once you truly understand it, is so simple it seems almost insulting. It explains everything about why some people achieve their goals while others struggle their entire lives. Yet almost no one sees it. Let me tell you why. The barrier between you and success is not outside you. It never was. The obstacle isn't in your circumstances, your resources, or your history. The obstacle is invisible because it's internal, and we've been trained since childhood to look everywhere except where the answer actually resides. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Easy for you to say. You don't know my situation. And you're right, I don't know your specific circumstances. But I do know something about human nature that applies universally, and once you see it, you'll understand both why success is so rare and why it's so achievable for anyone willing to do what others won't. Consider this simple observation. Two seeds planted side by side in the same soil, receiving identical sunlight and water. One becomes a mighty oak, the other remains stunted. The conditions were identical. The soil didn't cause the difference. The weather didn't cause it. Something invisible did, something already present within each seed. Human beings work exactly the same way. Walk into any office, any factory, any organization in the country. You'll find people in identical positions, same job, same boss, same salary, same economy, same opportunities available to everyone. Give them 10 years. Watch what happens. Their lives will diverge completely. Some will have advanced dramatically, others will be exactly where they started, or worse. Same soil, same conditions, wildly different outcomes. Now, why do you suppose that is? The explanation cannot be circumstances, because the circumstances were identical. The explanation cannot be luck, because luck affects everyone. Good breaks come to all, and so do bad ones. The explanation must be something else entirely, something that varies between individuals, even when everything external remains constant. Someone once asked Dr. Albert Schweitzer, the Nobel laureate, what was wrong with people today? The great doctor paused a moment, and then he said something that should stop us all cold. Men simply don't think. That's it. 3 words. Men don't think. Not that they can't think, not that they lack the capacity, but that they don't. They avoid it. They substitute activity for thought, busyness for reflection, reaction for creation. And this single pattern, this habitual avoidance of genuine thinking, explains nearly everything about why most people remain stuck year after year, while a small minority seems to achieve whatever they set their minds to. William James, the great Harvard psychologist, observed that circumstances don't make the person, they reveal the person. The Bible puts it even more directly. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The wise have always known that the barrier is internal. It's only the rest of us who keep looking outside. Here's the trap most people fall into, and I want you to watch for it in yourself. We instinctively point to external explanations because they're comfortable. Blaming the economy requires nothing of us. Pointing to our lack of connections excuses our inaction. Citing our difficult childhood explains away our present results. These explanations feel true because they describe real circumstances. Yes, the economy is challenging. Yes, connections help. Yes, childhood shapes us. But none of these factors determine our outcomes, because all around us are people with worse circumstances who are achieving more than we are. The moment you blame something outside yourself, you surrender control. You become helpless. If my failure is caused by the economy, then my success depends on the economy changing, something I cannot control. If my stagnation is caused by my lack of a degree, then my progress depends on going back to school, something that may be impossible right now. External explanations feel like wisdom, but function as prison bars. So let me ask you again, now that we've cleared away some of the comfortable lies, what stands between you and success? The answer isn't outside you. But if it's not money, not connections, not education, not luck, not circumstances, then what exactly is this invisible barrier? What is this internal factor that determines whether you rise or remain stuck? That's precisely what we need to examine next. Let's try a thought experiment. I want you to take 100 people who start even at the age of 25. All of them believe they're going to be successful. All of them have dreams, ambitions, plans. They're young, energetic, optimistic. They fully expect that by the time they retire, they'll have achieved financial independence at the very least. Do you have any idea what will happen to those 100 people by the time they reach age 65? Here's what the statistics tell us, and these numbers are worth remembering because they'll explain a great deal about human nature. Only one will be rich. Just 1 out of 100. 4 will be financially independent, comfortable, able to live as they choose. 5 will still be working, not because they want to, but because they have to. 36 will be dead. And 54, more than half of those who started with such hope will be broke, dependent on others for the necessities of life. Social security, family, charity. The dreams they had at 25, gone. The plans, abandoned. The optimism, replaced by resignation. Only 5 out of 100 make the grade. 5%. Now here's the question that should keep us up at night. Why? Why do 95% fail to achieve the independence they wanted so badly? What happened between 25 and 65 that turned hopeful young people into struggling older ones? It can't be lack of desire. They all wanted success. It can't be lack of ability. Success doesn't require genius. Ordinary capability is enough, and most people have that. It can't be lack of opportunity. We live in an age of abundant opportunity, more than any previous generation in history. Something else is happening. Some pattern, some behavior, some choice, repeated over decades, separates the 5% from the 95. The psychologist Rollo May identified it precisely. He wrote that the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it is conformity. Conformity. Think about what that means. The 95% didn't fail because they lacked bravery. They failed because they did what everyone else did. They conformed to the patterns around them. They adopted the habits of the majority, the schedules of the majority, the thinking of the majority, and they got the results of the majority. When you do what everyone else does, you get what everyone else gets. Since most people fail to achieve their goals, conforming to most people's patterns guarantees you'll fail too. It's mathematical. It's inevitable. Imagine a great river flowing toward a waterfall. 95 logs float with the current, drifting wherever the water takes them. They don't choose the waterfall, they simply don't choose anything. They conform to the current because that's what logs do if nobody intervenes. 5 logs somehow move against the current. They reach the calm shore before the falls. They end up somewhere completely different. What distinguished those 5 wasn't superior wood or favorable weather. It was movement against the current when everyone else was drifting with it. Human beings work exactly the same way. From the moment most people wake up, they begin reacting. The alarm rings, they react. Traffic demands attention, they react. The inbox fills up, they react. The boss makes a request, they react. A problem arises, they react. Another day passes in reaction mode, and before they know it, another year is gone and another decade. Now here's what's critical to understand. Reaction requires no thinking whatsoever. A thermostat reacts to temperature. An amoeba reacts to stimuli. A machine reacts to input. Reaction is the default mode of all living and even non-living systems. It's automatic. It requires no effort, no planning, no genuine thought. And it will never, can never, make you successful. Success requires direction, and direction requires decision, and decision requires thought. The reactive person never gets around to the thought part. They're too busy reacting to whatever demands attention right now. Watch the morning routine of anyone you know. Count the moments of genuine choice versus automatic reaction. Most people's days contain almost 0 moments of actual decision-making. Everything is reaction to external stimuli, emails, requests, problems, appointments. The day happens to them rather than being shaped by them. Now compare this to the successful 5%. They protect time for thinking. They have goals that guide their choices. They decide what's important rather than letting circumstances decide for them. They move against the current. Emerson warned us not to become the shadow of somebody else. The Bible counsels against following the multitude. Every teacher of success throughout history has pointed to the same pattern. The majority drifts, and drifting leads to the waterfall. Here's the error most people make, and I want you to watch for it in yourself. They assume they're different from the 95% without any evidence. They believe they're exceptional while behaving exactly like everyone else. They expect different results while following identical patterns. If your morning looks like everyone else's morning, your life will look like everyone else's life. If your thinking patterns match the majority's thinking patterns, your results will match the majority's results. It's that simple. The good news, and there is good news, is that conformity is a choice. It's not imposed upon you. Nobody forces you to react all day. Nobody requires you to drift with the current. The 5% aren't superhuman. They simply made a different choice than the 95. But what exactly is that choice? We've seen that conformity explains failure and that most people live reactively. We've seen that the successful move against the current somehow. But how? What specifically are the 5% doing differently? What is this thinking they engage in that the majority avoids? That's the question we need to answer next. Because once you understand exactly what separates the 5 from the 95, you can decide which group you want to belong to. Now we arrive at the strangest secret I know. Strange because it explains everything, yet almost nobody sees it. Strange because it's been known for thousands of years, yet each generation has to discover it anew. Strange because it's so simple that people dismiss it before they understand it. Here is the fundamental truth that explains everything we've observed. The barrier between you and success is mental laziness, the habitual avoidance of the painful work of generating genuinely new ideas. Now let me say that again, because this is the key to everything. The barrier between you and success is mental laziness, not stupidity, not lack of talent, not insufficient education or absent opportunity. Mental laziness, the choice to avoid the discomfort of real thought. Most people never think at all. They merely rearrange their existing prejudices. They have opinions, certainly. They have reactions. They have familiar patterns of responding to familiar situations. But actual thinking, the deliberate, effortful generation of genuinely new ideas, this they avoid as though it were a disease. And there's a reason they avoid it. Thinking hurts. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it literally. When you force your mind to generate ideas that don't yet exist, to create rather than retrieve, to construct rather than remember, it creates actual discomfort. Your brain resists. It feels like pushing against a heavy door. There's mental friction, cognitive strain, a distinct unpleasantness that most people instinctively flee. Why does thinking hurt? Because genuine thought requires building new neural pathways, new connections, new structures in the mind. Your brain, like any system, prefers efficiency over growth. Running familiar patterns is easy. Constructing new ones requires energy, and your brain would rather conserve that energy if possible. So most people retreat. The moment real thinking begins, the moment the discomfort appears, they find something else to do. Check the news, make a phone call, solve a familiar problem. Anything but push through the pain of actual thought. And here's the tragedy. That discomfort they're fleeing isn't a signal to stop. It's a signal that they've finally begun. Let me give you an analogy that makes this concrete. Imagine two powerful magnets placed on either side of a flowing river. One magnet represents your current circumstances. The other represents the success you desire. Between them flows the river of daily life, all the activity, all the busyness, all the demands that fill your hours. Now, most people remain suspended in the middle of that river. They can feel both magnets pulling. They're attracted toward success, they want it, they dream about it. But they're also held by their current circumstances, the familiar, the known, the comfortable. What keeps them suspended? What prevents them from reaching either shore? It's not the current. The current affects everyone equally. It's not the strength of the magnets. Success pulls powerfully on anyone who aligns with it. The barrier is something simpler, more personal, more addressable. They don't know how to swim. Thinking is swimming. It's the skill that moves you through the barrier between where you are and where you want to be. Without that skill, you remain suspended forever, pulled in both directions, reaching neither shore. And like swimming, thinking feels unnatural at first. It requires effort that seems disproportionate to the movement gained. It's uncomfortable, even painful, until you build capacity. Most people try it once, feel the discomfort, and decide it's not for them. They go back to floating. But here's what those who learn to swim discover. The more you think, the easier thinking becomes. The mind, like a muscle, grows stronger with use. The person who forces themselves to think daily builds capacity that the non-thinker can't imagine. What once required agonizing effort becomes natural. The barrier that once seemed impenetrable becomes nothing more than a brief stretch of water to cross. Now let me make an important distinction, because many people confuse activity with thinking. Answering emails is not thinking. It's reacting to other people's agendas. Attending meetings is not thinking. It's often just performing attention. Solving problems you've solved before is not thinking. It's remembering. Following procedures is not thinking. It's executing. Even reading and studying, while valuable, are not thinking in the sense I mean. They're input, not output. Thinking, genuine thinking, occurs only when you generate ideas that didn't exist before you generated them, when you confront something truly new and create a response rather than retrieve one, when you produce rather than consume. Most people's days contain 0 moments of this. They're mentally active every waking hour, but none of that activity is genuine thought. They're reacting, retrieving, repeating, but never creating. Track your own day if you doubt this. Note every moment of genuine thinking, novel idea generation, not retrieval, not reaction. Be honest with yourself. Most people who do this honestly discover the answer is 0. Days, weeks, even months pass without a single moment of actual thought, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Throughout history, the great minds have agreed on this point despite disagreeing on nearly everything else. Marcus Aurelius wrote that our life is what our thoughts make of it. Emerson declared that a man becomes what he thinks about all day long. William James said the greatest discovery of his generation was that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. The Bible promises that as you sow in the field of the mind, so shall you reap. They all saw the same truth. The barrier is internal, and it can be broken. Here's what you need to understand most clearly. Mental laziness is a habit, not a fixed trait. It's something you do, not something you are. And habits, unlike talents, can be changed. The wall between you and success is made of behavior, not brick. This means you can break through. It means the 95% who fail aren't doomed by fate. They're stuck by pattern. Change the pattern, and you change the outcome. But does this principle actually work? What evidence confirms it? How does it operate in the real world? Those questions deserve careful answers, and that's exactly what we'll examine next. Now let me tell you about a stove. This stove is going to explain more about success and failure than any philosophy book ever written, because this stove cannot lie. Imagine a man standing in front of a cold stove on a winter morning. He crosses his arms and says, "Give me heat, and then I'll add the wood." We smile at his foolishness, don't we? Obviously, the stove can't produce heat without fuel. The man has the sequence backwards. First the wood, then the heat. That's how stoves work. That's how the universe works. Cause must precede effect. Now here's what's fascinating. This is exactly how most people approach their lives. Give me the promotion, and then I'll start thinking harder about my work. Give me more money, and then I'll save and invest. Give me the opportunity, and then I'll give extra effort. Give me proof this will work, and then I'll start practicing. They're standing before the cold stove of their circumstances, demanding heat they haven't earned through fuel they refuse to provide, and they'll stand there forever because the stove can't comply. The principle operates mechanically, not magically. Success follows thinking the way heat follows fuel. The sequence cannot be reversed, negotiated, or bypassed. This isn't motivation or positive thinking or wishful attitude. This is mechanics. This is cause and effect. This is how reality operates, whether we like it or not. Now, why do I emphasize this mechanical nature? because it removes all mystery from the process. You're not dealing with luck or fate or cosmic forces that might or might not favor you. You're dealing with a predictable sequence of cause and effect. Add fuel, get heat. Think, get results. The stove doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about your family background, your education, your connections, or your past failures. It responds to one thing only. Whether you added the wood, your circumstances work identically. This is enormously hopeful if you'll see it clearly. The stove plays no favorites, but it also makes no exceptions. It will produce heat for anyone who adds fuel. Here's where most people go wrong. They wait. They wait for circumstances to improve before they'll invest serious thought. They wait for permission, for opportunity, for certainty, for the right moment. But the right moment is created by thinking, not found through waiting. The person who waits for circumstances to improve before thinking seriously waits forever, because circumstances improve as a result of thinking, not before it. The sequence cannot be reversed. Now here's something interesting. Intelligence is not the determining factor. This surprises people, but the evidence is overwhelming. Intelligence is distributed throughout every income level, every profession, every social class. There are brilliant people who are broke and average minds that are wealthy. There are geniuses stuck in dead-end jobs and ordinary people building empires. If intelligence determined success, the smartest people would always be the most successful. They aren't, not even close. The variable that actually predicts outcomes isn't IQ. It's the willingness to endure the discomfort of original thought. Smart people who won't think get nowhere. Ordinary people who will think go everywhere. Consider what this means. You don't need to become smarter to succeed. You don't need more education, a higher IQ, or special abilities. You need to add fuel to the stove. That's all. That's the entire requirement. The stove doesn't require that you be brilliant. It requires that you add wood. I want you to watch for a trap here, the belief that you're the exception. Yes, the stove requires fuel for most people, but my situation is different. My circumstances uniquely justify waiting. They don't. The universe makes no exceptions to cause and effect. The stove in your life works exactly like the stove in everyone else's life. Add wood, get heat. Skip the wood, stay cold. Every day spent waiting is a day the stove stays cold. Every day spent demanding results before investment is a day wasted. The sequence is fixed. Scripture tells us to give, and it shall be given. Every teacher of success throughout history has understood this cause-effect sequence. The successful move first. They add fuel before expecting heat. They invest before expecting return. They think before expecting results. Now let me ask you directly. Are you standing before the stove demanding heat, or are you adding wood? Watch yourself this week. Notice how often you wait for something external before you'll invest something internal. Notice how often you expect results before effort, reward before service, heat before fuel. Then try reversing the sequence. Add the wood first. See what happens. But I can already hear the objections forming. This sounds too simple. What about all the people who try and still fail? My situation really is different. These objections deserve answers, and they'll get them. Because if this principle is true, it needs to be demonstrated through more than one analogy. We need witnesses who can testify to its truth from different perspectives, different eras, different disciplines. That's exactly what we'll examine next. Imagine a courtroom where we're trying to establish a single fact. Does the principle we've been discussing actually work? Does thinking genuinely determine results? Now imagine the witnesses we can call to testify. First comes Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and philosopher, ruling the greatest empire in the ancient world. His testimony: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Next comes Ralph Waldo Emerson, America's greatest philosopher, influencing generations of thinkers. His testimony: a man is what he thinks about all day long. Then William James, the father of American psychology, establishing the scientific study of the human mind at Harvard. His testimony: the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. Solomon, the wisest king in biblical history, adds his voice. His testimony: as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. We could call dozens more, hundreds, thousands, from every era, every culture, every discipline, philosophers and psychologists, religious teachers and successful business people, scientists and artists, East and West, ancient and modern. Here's what's remarkable. Throughout all history, these great minds have disagreed with one another on nearly everything. They've argued about God and politics, ethics and economics, art and science. They've held contradictory views on almost every subject imaginable. But on this one point, they're in complete and unanimous agreement. We become what we think about. When witnesses this diverse agree this completely, the verdict moves beyond reasonable doubt. This isn't one person's opinion or one school of thought. This is the accumulated testimony of humanity's wisest minds across all time and all cultures, pointing to the same truth. Now, there's one objection that persists despite all this evidence, and I want to address it directly because I know some of you are thinking it right now. My situation is different. This is the conformist's last refuge. When every argument fails, when every excuse dissolves, this one remains. Yes, this may work for other people, but my circumstances are uniquely difficult. My obstacles are different. My situation is special. Let me tell you about some special situations throughout history. Abraham Lincoln was born into poverty so severe that his family was driven from their home 3 times before he was 7. His mother died when he was 9. He had less than 1 year of formal education in his entire life. He failed in business twice. He lost 8 elections. He suffered a nervous breakdown. His situation was different too. Thomas Edison was partially deaf from childhood. He was told by teachers that he was too stupid to learn anything. He was fired from his first 2 jobs. He failed thousands of times in his experiments. His situation was different. Helen Keller lost both sight and hearing before she was 2 years old. She couldn't communicate with other human beings for the first 7 years of her life. Her situation was certainly different. Every breakthrough story in history includes obstacles that could have justified quitting. The people in those stories faced real difficulties, not imagined ones, not minor inconveniences, but genuine hardships that would have stopped most people cold. But they didn't stop, not because their obstacles were smaller, but because they thought their way around them. Here's the truth about my situation is different. Your obstacles may indeed be real, but the excuse is not. The obstacles Lincoln faced were real. The obstacles Edison faced were real. The excuse that those obstacles made success impossible was not real, as their lives proved. The question isn't whether you have obstacles. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll use them as reasons to think harder or as excuses to stop thinking entirely. Now let me point to something important about the nature of evidence itself. We've built a case through philosophy, psychology, scripture, and historical example. Each type of evidence strengthens the others. Philosophy confirms the logic of the principle. Psychology confirms its mechanism in the human mind. Scripture confirms its recognition across religious traditions. Historical examples confirm its operation in real lives. Observable patterns confirm it in every workplace and family you've ever known. The web of evidence becomes unbreakable when it's woven from this many threads. At some point, additional evidence becomes procrastination. Once a principle is proven beyond reasonable doubt, the only remaining question is whether you'll apply it. Gathering more evidence becomes a way of avoiding the uncomfortable work of actual practice. I've shown you the stove. I've brought you the witnesses. I've addressed the objection that your situation is different. Now what? The principle is established. The evidence is overwhelming. The question shifts from, is this true, to, what am I going to do about it? Because knowledge without action changes nothing. Understanding without application is just entertainment. Agreeing with everything I've said while continuing to behave exactly as you did before places you squarely in the 95% who know the truth but don't act on it. The successful 5% aren't those who merely learn these principles, they're those who practice them. The gap between the 5 and the 95 isn't a gap in knowledge, it's a gap in application. So here's where we stand. You understand the barrier. You see that it's internal, not external. You know it's mental laziness, the avoidance of genuine thought. You've seen how the stove works, how cause must precede effect. You've heard the witnesses confirm the principle from every direction. The only question that remains is, what exactly do I do tomorrow morning? That's the question we'll answer next. Because understanding principles means nothing without a specific practice that breaks through mental laziness. You need something concrete, something you can begin immediately, something that forces your brain to actually think rather than merely rearranging its existing prejudices. And I know exactly what that practice is. Here is a specific practice that breaks through mental laziness. I want you to listen carefully, because this is where everything we've discussed becomes actionable. This is the method that separates the 5% from the 95. It's called the gold hour. Here's how it works. You wake 1 hour earlier than usual. Before the day's demands begin, before the emails, before the phone calls, before anyone else in your household stirs, you claim this hour for yourself. You take a blank sheet of paper, just ordinary paper, nothing special. At the top, you write a single question. How can I improve my work today? Then you force yourself to write 20 ideas. That's it. That's the entire practice. 1 hour, 1 page, 1 question, 20 ideas. Now let me tell you what happens when you actually do this, because the experience reveals everything about why most people fail and how you can succeed. The first 5 or 6 ideas come easily. They're obvious. Thoughts that were lurking just below the surface of your awareness, waiting to be noticed. You might have thought of them before. They flow onto the paper without much effort. You begin to think, this isn't so hard. Then something shifts. Ideas 7 through 12 require real work. You have to push. The easy answers are exhausted. Your mind starts to resist. You might stare at the paper for several minutes between each idea. The resistance feels uncomfortable, and you'll be tempted to declare yourself finished. Don't stop. Ideas 13 through 20 are where the real transformation happens, and they're agonizing. Your brain will scream that there are no more ideas. It will insist you've reached your limit. It will tell you this exercise is pointless, that you're wasting time, that you should quit and do something productive. This is a lie, and recognizing it as a lie is one of the most important things you'll ever learn. That discomfort you feel in the final stretch isn't a signal that you've run out of ideas. It's a signal that you've finally begun to actually think. The pain is the barrier breaking. The resistance is the wall coming down. Push through it anyway. Here's what happens when you force yourself to complete the full 20. The ideas that emerge in this final stretch are often the most valuable ones you'll ever have. They come from a deeper place than surface thought. They represent genuine creative thinking, not mental retrieval. They're ideas that would never have appeared if you'd stopped at 10 or 12. Ideas that your brain tried to convince you didn't exist. And the act of reaching them strengthens your capacity to reach them again. Think of it this way. A miner doesn't find gold on the surface. The valuable ore lies deep, requiring effort to reach. Your mind works the same way. The easy ideas, the first 5 or 6, are surface rocks, common and plentiful. Everyone has them. They're not worth much precisely because they're available to anyone who glances in that direction. The valuable ideas, the ones that can change your work, your career, your life, require digging past the point where most people quit. They exist in the space between I can't think of anything else and the 20th idea forced onto the page anyway. The gold hour mines that space every single day. Now let me explain why each element of this practice matters, because you might be tempted to modify it. Don't. Why 1 hour? Because less isn't enough time to push through to the valuable ideas, and more isn't sustainable. 1 hour is the sweet spot, enough time to do real work, not so much that you'll skip it when life gets busy. Why early morning? Because the morning is the only time you can reliably protect. Once the day begins, it will consume every moment you allow it to take. The phone will ring, the emails will arrive, the crises will demand attention. By waking an hour early, you claim time that nothing else can touch. Why 20 ideas? Because it's beyond what comes easily. 10 ideas lets you coast on the surface. 20 forces you into the territory where genuine thinking happens. The number isn't arbitrary. It's calibrated to push you past your comfort zone without being impossible. Why writing? Because writing forces clarity. Ideas in your head remain vague, fuzzy, half-formed. Ideas on paper must become specific. The act of writing is itself a form of thinking, perhaps the most powerful form. If you try to do this exercise mentally, without paper, you'll fool yourself into believing you've thought when you've merely daydreamed. Why the question, how can I improve my work today? Because it's specific enough to direct your thinking, but broad enough to allow creativity. You're not asking, what's wrong with my work? That leads to complaint, not creation. You're asking, how can I improve? That leads to ideas you can actually use. Now here's what happens over time if you practice the gold hour consistently. The first month feels like torture. Every morning is a struggle. Your brain resists. 20 ideas seems impossible. The discomfort is acute. The second month feels merely difficult. The resistance is still there, but you've learned to push through it. You know the ideas will come if you persist. By the third month, something remarkable begins to happen. You're generating better ideas earlier in the process. Ideas that would have been numbers 15 or 16 are now appearing at numbers 7 or 8. By the sixth month, you'll be generating more valuable ideas by idea number 5 than you used to generate by idea number 20. Your thinking capacity has expanded. The muscle has grown stronger. And by a year in, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. The gold hour will feel less like discipline and more like necessity, not a practice you force yourself to do, but a practice you'd never willingly skip. 1 hour per day of dedicated thinking. That's all it takes. It's been demonstrated that 1 hour per day of focused study in your chosen field puts you at the top of that field within 3 years. The gold hour operationalizes this principle not through passive study, but through active thought generation. Now let me warn you about the common errors, because I know how tempting it is to modify the practice before you've tried it as specified. I'll do 10 ideas instead of 20. Don't. 10 lets you coast. 20 forces the breakthrough. I'll do it in the evening instead of morning. Don't. Evenings get consumed. You'll skip it. I'll think without writing. Don't. You'll deceive yourself about how much thinking you're actually doing. I'll try it next week when things calm down. Don't. Things never calm down. Start tomorrow. The practice works because it's uncomfortable. Modifying it to make it comfortable removes the elements that make it effective. Here's what I want you to do tonight. Set your alarm for 1 hour earlier than usual. Put a blank sheet of paper and a pen on your desk or table. Go to sleep with the clear intention that tomorrow morning, before anything else happens, you will write 20 ideas for improving your work. Tomorrow, when that alarm goes off and resistance appears, because it will appear, remember what you now know. That resistance is the barrier. Pushing through it is the entire point. The discomfort means you're finally thinking. The gold hour awaits you every morning. The blank page awaits your ideas. The uncomfortable stretch from idea 13 to idea 20 awaits your courage. You know what to do. The only question is whether you'll do it. Now let me show you exactly what's at stake. Let me trace 2 lives forward in time so you can see concretely what changes when thinking replaces reacting. Consider 2 people starting in identical circumstances. Same job, same company, same boss, same salary, same opportunities available to both. They sit in adjacent cubicles. Their resumes are interchangeable. From the outside, there's no reason to expect their lives will diverge. One of them begins the gold hour practice. One does not. Let's trace them forward. In month 1, the difference is invisible. Both show up to work. Both do their jobs. The one practicing the gold hour is generating 140 ideas per week, but most of those ideas haven't been implemented yet. Nothing observable has changed. In month 3, subtle differences appear. The gold hour practitioner has begun to see her work differently. She's noticed inefficiencies others accept as permanent. She's spotted opportunities hiding in problems. She's developed solutions to things that frustrated her for years. She mentions a few of these observations to her supervisor. Some are implemented. Her colleague, still reacting to each day as it comes, hasn't noticed any of this. He's working just as hard. But his working produces the same results it always did. In month 6, the supervisor has started to notice the difference. One of these employees seems to have a knack for improvement. She brings ideas to meetings. She solves problems before they're assigned to her. She seems to understand the work at a deeper level. She's promoted. The other employee sees the promotion and feels it's unfair. We do the same job, he thinks. Why her and not me? He doesn't see that they stopped doing the same job months ago. In year 1, the divergence accelerates. The gold hour practitioner has built a reputation as someone who thinks. she's given increasingly complex problems to solve. Each solution enhances her reputation further. She's promoted again. Her former colleague is still in the same cubicle, still reacting, still wondering why success seems to find some people and not others. In year 5, they're no longer comparable. One has risen to a leadership position. She earns 3 times what she started at. She's known throughout the organization as someone who creates value. Opportunities come to her unsolicited. The other hasn't moved at all. He's actually earning less in real terms than when he started. Once you account for inflation, he's begun to tell himself that the system is rigged, that success is about politics, that the talented get overlooked. He doesn't see that his colleagues simply thought when he wouldn't. In year 10, the difference is vast. Same starting point, same soil, same conditions, wildly different lives. Now here's what I want you to understand. This isn't fiction. This pattern plays out in every organization, every industry, every community on earth. You can find examples in your own workplace if you look carefully. The people who rise think. The people who stagnate react. Let me give you an analogy that makes this vivid. 2 farmers inherit adjacent plots of identical land. Same soil, same water, same climate, same market prices for their crops. By any external measure, they have equal opportunity. One farmer rises early each day. Before beginning the physical work, he spends an hour thinking about his farm. How can I improve my soil? What could I plant that would bring higher prices? Where am I wasting effort? What are other successful farmers doing that I'm not? He writes down his ideas, tests them, refines them. The other farmer sleeps later. He does the obvious work, the planting and harvesting that anyone can see needs doing. But he never thinks systematically about improvement. He reacts to each season as it comes. In year 1, the difference is subtle. Both farms produce crops. Both farmers work hard. You'd have to look closely to see any divergence. By year 5, one farm is flourishing while the other struggles. The thinking farmer has improved his soil through techniques he researched. He shifted to more profitable crops he identified through analysis. He's eliminated waste he discovered through careful observation. The reacting farmer has done none of this. He's still doing what he's always done, getting what he's always gotten. By year 10, visitors can't believe the 2 farms were ever identical. One is prosperous and growing, the other is barely surviving. Same land, same weather, same markets. The only difference was that one farmer thought and one didn't. Now here's the principle operating behind both examples, and I want you to see it clearly. Small daily differences compound into massive yearly differences. One good idea per week doesn't seem like much, but one good idea per week is 52 good ideas per year. That's 520 good ideas per decade. Even if only 10% of those ideas produce meaningful improvement, you've still generated 52 significant advantages over a decade. Your colleague who generates 0 ideas per week generates 0 advantages. The compound divergence becomes enormous over time. There's another effect I want you to notice. The thinking person spots opportunities invisible to others, not because the opportunities weren't there, they were there for everyone. But opportunities only become visible to minds that are actively looking. The person practicing the gold hour is asking, how can I improve every single day? That question creates a filter through which they see the world. They notice things they would have missed before. They see possibilities where others see only problems. The person just reacting to each day has no such filter. They see what's obvious and miss everything else. Finally, notice how problems affect these 2 people differently. The reactive person is paralyzed by problems. They complain about them, work around them, accept them as fixed features of reality. The thinking person sees problems as puzzles. Every problem is another chance to practice the question, how can I improve this? Problems become raw material for ideas rather than obstacles to progress. Same problems, entirely different relationship to them. Now let me ask you directly, which person are you right now, and which person do you want to become? The divergence starts small, an hour a day, 20 ideas on a page. It doesn't feel significant when you begin. But the farmer doesn't judge his success by what spring looks like. He knows the harvest comes later. The compound effect takes time to become visible. Start the practice. Stay with it through the early months when nothing seems to change. Trust that the divergence is happening beneath the surface. even when you can't see it yet. Because 10 years from now, you'll either look back on this moment as the turning point when everything changed, or you'll look back and wish you'd started. The gold hour awaits. Now let me show you something that extends far beyond your career, far beyond the 20 ideas you write each morning, far beyond any single area of life. When thinking becomes habit in one domain, it spreads to others. The person who practices the gold hour for their work inevitably begins thinking about other areas. The mental capacity built through the daily practice doesn't stay confined to professional questions. It expands outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. You start by asking, how can I improve my work today? But the habit of asking how to improve becomes part of who you are. Soon you find yourself asking other questions. How can I improve my marriage? How can I improve my health? How can I improve my relationships with my children? How can I improve how I spend my money? How can I improve how I spend my time? The gold hour is the stone. The initial splash is your work life. But the ripples extend to your marriage, your health, your friendships, your finances, your character, your contribution to the world. Every area touched by the expanding circles of your enhanced capacity for thought. Here's what's remarkable. You don't become someone who thinks about work. You become someone who thinks. Period. This identity shift is the most important transformation that occurs. As long as you see the gold hour as a technique you're practicing, something you do, you're vulnerable to quitting when it gets hard or when life gets busy. Techniques can be abandoned. But once you become someone who thinks, once thinking is part of your identity, part of who you are, consistency becomes natural. You're not forcing yourself to do something foreign. You're expressing your character. The person who thinks doesn't need willpower to practice the gold hour. That's just what people like them do. The Greeks had a word for this kind of comprehensive human flourishing, eudaimonia. They recognized that excellence in one area develops excellence in others. Virtue strengthens virtue. Capacity builds capacity. Modern psychology confirms this observation. Researchers have identified what they call keystone habits, behaviors that trigger cascades of positive change across multiple domains. When you develop a keystone habit, you don't just improve in that single area, you improve everywhere. The gold hour is a keystone habit for thinking itself. And since thinking underlies performance in every area of life, strengthening your thinking capacity improves your approach to everything. Let me trace these ripples concretely. Your career improves because you're generating better ideas, solving harder problems, creating more value. We've already explored this in detail. Your relationships improve because you're now bringing the same thoughtfulness to them. You start asking, how can I be a better spouse? And forcing yourself to generate 20 specific ideas. You ask, how can I be a better parent? And discover answers you'd never have found by merely reacting to each situation as it arose. Most people's relationships suffer from the same mental laziness that afflicts their careers. They react to their spouse instead of thinking about how to improve the marriage. They react to their children instead of thinking about how to guide their development. The gold hour, applied to relationships, transforms them. Your health improves because you're thinking about it systematically rather than just reacting to symptoms. How can I improve my energy? Generates 20 ideas you can test. How can I improve my sleep? Produces a different 20. The thoughtful person doesn't just complain about feeling tired. They generate possibilities and try them. Your finances improve because you're applying the same rigor. How can I improve my financial situation? Isn't a question most people ever ask deliberately. They just react to each expense, each paycheck, each bill. The gold hour approach generates ideas for earning more, spending less, investing better. Your sense of purpose improves because you're finally thinking about what matters. How can I contribute more? How can I use my abilities to serve others? These questions don't get asked in a reactive life, but they're exactly the questions that give life meaning. Now here's something else that happens when you become someone who thinks. You attract other people who think. The reactive majority tends to cluster together. Their conversations are complaints and gossip, problems without solutions, frustrations without ideas. They reinforce each other's helplessness. But thinkers attract thinkers. When you start generating ideas, you'll find other people who also generate ideas. These people become collaborators, partners, friends. Your ideas cross-pollinate with their ideas. The network effect multiplies everyone's effectiveness. The isolation of conformity gives way to rich collaboration. Success, it turns out, isn't lonely when you're surrounded by other growing minds. Let me warn you against one error that's tempting to make at this point: compartmentalization. Some people try to think about work, but not relationships, or think about money, but not health, or think about career, but not character. They wall off certain areas, applying the gold hour to some domains while leaving others to drift. This is a mistake. The capacity doesn't compartmentalize. When you strengthen your ability to think, that capacity is available everywhere. Choosing not to use it in certain areas doesn't preserve energy. It just leaves those areas to stagnate. And the areas you neglect have a way of undermining the areas you develop. What good is career success if your health collapses? What good is financial wealth if your relationships are impoverished? What good is any external achievement if your character hasn't grown alongside it? The gold hour isn't a productivity hack for getting ahead at work. It's a way of being that elevates every domain of existence. Use it comprehensively. One final observation before we move to what all of this asks of you. Most people possess a capacity they never use. The ability to think, genuinely think, to generate new ideas, to create rather than just react, is built into every human mind. It's our distinctive gift. Animals react. Machines react. Only human beings can think. Yet most people barely use this capacity. They inherit a vast estate and never walk through its rooms. They possess a treasure and leave it buried. They have the ability to shape their circumstances through thought, and instead let circumstances shape them through reaction. The gold hour is claiming what was always yours. It's walking through rooms you've never entered. It's digging up treasure that's been waiting for you your whole life. This capacity for thought is the most valuable thing you possess, more valuable than any amount of money, any connection, any credential. Because all of those things can be generated through thought, while none of them can substitute for it. Use what you have. Think. Let me return now to where we began, to the question I asked at the very start. What stands between you and success? We've traveled far since I first posed that question. We've dismantled the comfortable lies about external barriers. We've examined the 95% who fail and discovered the conformity that ensures their failure. We've named the real barrier, mental laziness, the habitual avoidance of genuine thought. We've seen the stove that cannot lie and heard the witnesses who cannot be dismissed. We've learned the gold hour practice. We've traced two lives diverging over a decade. We've watched the ripples spread from one area of life to every other. Now only one question remains, and it's the question that matters most. What will you actually do? Here's the truth that separates this chapter from all the others. Knowing all this changes nothing until you act. The 95% who fail aren't ignorant. Many of them have heard these principles before. They've read the books, attended the seminars, nodded along with ideas exactly like the ones I've shared with you today. They agreed with everything. They understood it intellectually. They intended to apply it, and then they went right back to reacting. The gap between the 5% and the 95 isn't a gap in knowledge, it's a gap in action. The successful don't know different things, they do different things. They practice what others only ponder. So let me ask you directly, which group will you choose to join? Tomorrow morning, the alarm will ring. You'll have a choice to make. You can hit snooze and begin another day of reaction, responding to emails, attending meetings, solving familiar problems, drifting with the current, conforming to patterns that produce conforming results. You can join the 95% who know what to do but don't do it. Or you can rise an hour early. You can take your blank page. You can write your question at the top and force yourself to generate 20 ideas. You can push through the discomfort of ideas 13 through 20. You can add fuel to the stove before expecting heat. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Now here's something important to understand. This choice doesn't happen once. It happens every single morning for the rest of your life. You're never finished deciding. You're always deciding again. The person who practices the gold hour for a month and then stops has gained almost nothing. The person who practices it for a year and then stops has gained something, but not nearly what's possible. The person who practices it for a decade, consistently, through difficult mornings and busy seasons and moments of doubt, that person transforms completely. Consistency isn't a single choice. It's thousands of small choices made fresh every morning when the alarm sounds. This is actually good news. It means you're never locked into your past. Every morning offers a new opportunity to choose differently. If you've spent years reacting, tomorrow you can begin thinking. If you've let the practice slip, tomorrow you can resume it. The fork in the road appears every day, and every day you get to choose again. Imagine yourself 1 year from tomorrow, looking back at this moment. In one version of that future, you started the gold hour the morning after you heard about it. You struggled through the first weeks. Some mornings were painful, but you persisted. Now, a year later, your work is transformed. Your relationships have deepened. Your capacity for thought has expanded beyond what you once imagined possible. You see opportunities you would have missed before. You solve problems that would have paralyzed you before. You're becoming someone new. In another version of that future, you agreed with everything you heard, but did nothing about it. A year has passed, and you're exactly where you were, perhaps a bit more discouraged, because now you know that you knew what to do and still didn't do it. The 95% include many people who could recite these principles perfectly but never practiced them. Which future do you want? The math of this choice favors you enormously. You risk 1 hour of sleep per day, that's all. 1 hour, less time than most people spend on entertainment or distraction. In exchange, you gain the possibility of a transformed life. The compound effects we've traced, the divergence that separates the 5% from the 95, the ripples that extend into every domain. 1 hour of sleep against your whole life to win. Now let me tell you what to do tonight. Set your alarm for 1 hour earlier than usual. Don't wait until next week when things calm down. Things never calm down. The time to begin is now. Put a blank sheet of paper and a pen next to your bed or on the desk where you'll sit. Remove all friction from the process. Make it as easy as possible to start. Go to sleep with the clear intention that tomorrow morning, before anything else happens, you will claim your gold hour. When that alarm sounds, and this is critical, don't think, don't evaluate, don't ask yourself if you feel like it. Just get up. Start the practice. Let the decision you made tonight carry you through the morning's resistance. The resistance will appear. Your brain will protest. It will tell you that you're tired, that one more day won't matter, that you can start next week. This is the barrier speaking. This is mental laziness making its final argument. Remember what you know, that resistance is the signal that you're about to break through. The discomfort means you're finally thinking. Push through anyway. Write your question at the top of the page. How can I improve my work today? Then generate 20 ideas. Force them out even when your mind insists there are no more, especially then. When you finish, you'll have done something remarkable. You'll have joined the 5%, not because of luck or talent or circumstance, but because you chose to think when others chose to react. Do it again the next day, and the next, and the next. Let the compound effect build. Let the ripples spread. Let yourself become someone new. Most people will never do this. They'll agree with these ideas. They'll recognize their truth. They'll intend to practice them someday. And they'll continue drifting with the current until they wash over the falls with the 95% who knew what to do but didn't do it. Let that describe others. Let it not describe you. The gold hour awaits you every morning. The blank page awaits your ideas. The uncomfortable stretch from idea 13 to idea 20 awaits your courage. Someone once asked Dr. Albert Schweitzer, what was wrong with people today? The great doctor paused and said simply, men don't think. Tomorrow morning you have the opportunity to prove yourself an exception. Here's what you have to remember. Thinking is the only real barrier. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is negotiable. Everything else can be figured out, worked around, overcome if you'll think. This one thing determines everything. The barrier between you and success isn't money, isn't connections, isn't education, isn't luck. The barrier is mental laziness, and you now know exactly how to break it. Start tomorrow. You have nothing to lose, but you have your whole life to win.